George Scott and Mary Flanders from Nordhavn 46 Egret. We're here to tell you about Egret's travels in 9.5 years of full-time live aboard and our recent circumnavigation. A lot of people are concerned about safety, so we should talk about it. It's quite safe to be on a boat today. The electronics we have today are just amazing. First of all, GPS allowed many of us to go to sea. Communication is another thing. We have an Iridium phone, so any place in the world, any time of the day, 24 hours a day, we can pick up the phone and call anyone we wish. We have email capability aboard. The autopilot drives the boat. We don't steer the boat. In fact, we don't even have a helm chair. You can literally put in a waypoint, and 1,000 miles later, when the alarm goes off, you're there. And it's kind of that simple. The charting today is very, very accurate. There's some places it's not as accurate. However, by the time you get there, you'll know exactly, it'll just make sense to you because you coordinate everything with your radar, with your depth finder, and your plotter. And it's quite easy, actually. And if I had never gone to sea and were listening to this, I'd sort of shake my head and say, yeah, right. But truly it is. And you have to understand, I was 50 years old before I turned on my first computer. So if I can do it, there's a person listening to this that can't do it. Another innovation to come along relatively not too far in the past was AIS. And all the ships today have it. It's an automatic identification system. So we have it set at 12 miles. And any target within 25 minutes and a 4-mile approach. So when that alarm goes off, the most important line on that instrument is your CPA, which is closest point of approach. And it doesn't lie. The large ships today are driven by insurance companies. They're told what to do, and they don't even call you anymore and ask you if you'll move. They just move. We had a freighter, not a freighter, a tanker, over 1,000 feet long, at 3 miles, turn, and it turned surprisingly fast. And they just moved. They moved out of our way, and they had the right of way. And we were preparing to move, and anytime we do move, we make a drastic change, so there's no question what we've done. Of course, they're following us on radar as well. So if you did a circumnavigation or a major crossing or even coastal cruising in the 60s, 70s, even the 80s, that was very, very different, even early 90s, than what we have today. And today it is just so much better than what we had in the past.
To say about that. We went to a trawler fest, and we'd been looking at boats for a while. Do we want a coastal cruiser? Well, basically we're looking at coastal cruisers, so we hadn't thought about going across the ocean. And we had a smaller coastal cruising boat, so now we're looking for something bigger to live on. I told Scott I didn't want to camp for the rest of my life, so it had to be a little bit bigger boat. We went to Trawler Fest, and there were all these different trawlers. And there was one boat that was rather large. I believe it was a 57 Nordhavn. Never been on one in my life. And we got on that boat. And I'm not talking about looking at, I'm not the type of person that would look at and say, oh, I love that stove, or I love that lamp or something. I'm looking at safety, security, that's what I want in a boat. So we got on the 57 Nordhavn, and I just fell in love with that boat. I knew that was a quality boat, just a boat that you could go to sea in. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not a mechanic, but looking around that boat, I was hooked on Nordhavns, and we had a long talk coming back from that trawler fest between coastal cruising and taking a boat that's blue water capable boat. And it was more for our budget, obviously, to get a Nordhavn. But I said, you know, even though we're coastal cruising, you never know what's down the road. So I'd really rather get this boat that can do everything. We didn't get a 57, of course. We got a 46, and we love it, because that's what we would want anyway for our lifestyle and what we could afford. But we never looked back. I'm sure there are many women who are wondering what it's like to live on a boat, whether it's in a foreign country or whether you're just your daily living crossing the ocean. What do you do all day? What is it like? It's not unlike being at home, actually, because Egret is our home. There are some things I had to adjust to. I didn't speak anything other than English. A little bit of smattering of Spanish was all I had, which wasn't much. And when we go to a foreign country, when I go shopping, it takes me a little longer. I don't have a car. I get in my dinghy with my husband because it's kind of fun to go ashore. And we'll run over and we'll carry our little bags with us. We'll find the grocery store. And it takes me longer to shop because it's in a foreign language. But, you can do it. There's people to ask. English, by the way, is spoken just about everywhere. Not in the small cities and that sort of thing, but even if you run into someone who doesn't, generally people try to find somebody who does. Anyway, it takes a little longer to do your grocery shopping. It's certainly interesting. Cultural experience, so that is not to miss. Doing your laundry, I happen to do it on the boat. A lot of other cruisers don't. So you might find where specific things are for that, like doing your laundry and other kinds of shopping needs that you need and you have to ask. Other boaters are also wonderful because there's somebody there before you, and when you get there, they'll share with you. They're very friendly about it and tell you the ins and outs of being in that area. When we're at sea, it's very much like home. In the morning, my husband brings me coffee in bed. That's wonderful. And once I get up, it's what's for breakfast, what's for lunch, what's for dinner. So I do the cooking, and I don't mind. I enjoy that. And I have my doing watches, which is something we all share in. So reading books, watching movies, there's plenty to keep you occupied on the boat when you're at sea. And also being out in beautiful weather most of the time. Well, I'm certainly not a mechanic, so anything mechanical generally Scott's doing, and I'm getting the things for him, and I'm aware and watch him and try to learn, but I'm not changing hoses or changing oil and that sort of thing. Scott's doing all of that.
Mary carries it out to the back,
Yeah.
and I'm done with it because it's too hard for me to get out of the engine room, and I'm stiff.
But I'm neat. But anyway, living aboard, you have to naturally get used to a moving household. And that comes over time. I evolved as a mariner, so to speak. I wasn't born this way. A lot of people might think, how could you do that? But really, it's just, once we got our boat, and we liked being out on the water, and we took little trips here and there, eventually it led to crossing oceans, and I was used to it. Seasickness is something people ask me about. I used to get sick in a car, for Pete's sake, so I certainly could get seasick, and I did. But originally I started taking medication, just a over-the-counter type of thing. I found something worked for me, and I took that, and then I weaned myself off of it, and now I don't get seasick. But what I have to do if I'm at a dock for a long time, like we spent 9 months at a dock in Australia, when we left to cross to Mauritius, I had to go lay down for a little while when we first leave the dock because I'm not used to it. We've just been hooked up and the boat hadn't been moving. And then after a day or so, I feel just quite fine. Rough weather, Scott talked about in his blogs about the coffee carryometer, and we joke about that. Cooking can be a pain in the neck when you are bouncing around. But I would use a pressure cooker or make simple meals, or even if it was bad enough, which is very rare, we would have a snack, a sandwich or something, instead of cooking dinner, for instance. Sleeping is no problem because we're on watch and we do 4-hour watches. Everybody works out their own watch. And boy, I'm sleeping when I'm off my watch, I can tell you that. So living aboard is some adjustments, but after a while you'd be surprised what you can accept and get used to and not really consider a big deal.
that was one of my pet peeves. When we were in Barcelona and again in Turkey, we spent the winter during the med cruising. I watched a number of the rally boats. And at sea, you have to be able to safely walk around a boat. And your handholds are absolutely critical. And in our boat, there isn't a place you can't go where you're 100% supported by one hand or your hip. It's kind of funny to watch yourselves walk around, but nevertheless, we literally go from handhold to handhold. In some boats, they have like built-in furniture, and it's not even tied down. I mean, it can turn over, and that's where people get in trouble, is when they're trying to deal with something like that that's so superficial, just because something turned over, which doesn't really matter. That's where problems can happen. And what you don't want to do is get hurt at sea. So you have to be very, very careful of how you move. And a boat that doesn't have proper handholds and secure handholds and heavy-duty handholds in the shower, I mean, virtually everywhere you go in the boat is really a disservice to the people. So our boat, no matter how rough it is, we can move around the boat, and we can do it safely. So that's a big consideration of safety, and when you're looking at boats, you should look at that. We've been asked a few times about the difference between semi-displacement and full displacement boats. There's a time when semi-displacement is actually better, like for fishing, for example. You have more initial stability. But we're not fishing. And we used to have a small sport fish, and in half a day of fishing offshore, particularly during the winter when it was rough, you're just worn out. And fatigue will cause us bad decisions at sea. And it must be comfortable. And I can look anybody in the eye and say egret has never shuddered. And that's a big deal. In our sport fish boat, we just pounded. It was fast, because if you build a boat that's flat aft, it'll be fast. But that's not what we do. We need a soft, heavy, heavy ride. A boat needs to be very heavy, and if you have the beam that we have to live aboard, you've got to have the weight to sink the boat in the water. And another sort of pet peeve is the boats built on fishing boat hulls. Fishing boat hulls are actually very good sea boats. You know, it's proven, they've evolved over years. But they get their displacement or their comfort through very heavy displacement and draft. Well, as a world cruiser, you don't need like a 12-foot draft or something like that, or an 18-foot draft. And 60 or 100 tons of fish and ice, if you take that out of the boat, and then typically you build the boat higher to accommodate the things we like to have as full-time liveaboards, the boat becomes very tippy, or in marine talk, it's just tender. So a boat has to be specifically designed to live aboard the way we want to. And our boat does that very, very, very well.
When we were thinking about how much is enough, and should we retire now, and will our money last, that sort of thing. And we were concerned about that, obviously. And but we thought, we could work for more money, but what's the important thing is the next 10 years are so important. And here we are 9 years, now we're saying the next 10 years. But it's been good. We don't regret